will get started. And of course, I'd like to thank you all for joining us for our latest quarterly HR Leaders Roundtable. It's nice to see some familiar faces on the grid before it disappeared behind my deck, and some new faces. And those of you who have joined us for our previous roundtables, you'll have noticed that today I'm using Zoom meeting instead of broadcasting from a Zoom webinar. Now, this was a conscious decision that I made for this session because I want to recreate the in-person vibe that we used to have at our original roundtables in Soho. To recreate that sense of camaraderie and that sense of safety when we came to sort of sharing our concerns, and that what we got from peer-to-peer support. So this is my attempt at recreating that in a digital space. I'm sorry, I couldn't arrange the avocado toast for those of you that remember that, but let's try and recreate some of that feel. And for today's session, I've built in time for discussion, and I'd also really like you to use the chat to, like I say, that peer-to-peer aspect. So use the chat to introduce yourselves, share why you've joined, and if you're comfortable, use the chat to share some of the challenges and successes that you've had under the diversity, equity, and inclusion umbrella. Now, you'll notice that the meeting is being recorded, but I want to reassure you that is only so that we can collate the insights and the findings. And to reassure you that back to our Soho roundtables, it's the same. It is Chatham House rules. So anything you do share will be anonymized. Of course, we'll be sharing the takeaways with you, and there'll also be our quarterly report, which is essentially a toolkit for you to use as you need within your organization. So that will go out in the next 7 to 10 days so that you've got that all in one concise place. And like I say, please do use, the discussion time or the chat for your questions. But I also want you to remember that as diversity, inclusion, and employee wellbeing specialists, we at Happy Maven, we understand how daunting this all is. We understand how daunting it is to implement sustainable change. So please do take advantage of our free consultation sessions. And that's if you're struggling to get started, if you've hit a speed bump, or you just need a confidential sounding board, please do reach out. So, what's on the menu today? As you will have noticed from some of the invites, this is actually the first in what will be 4 sessions that will be looking at different aspects of diversity, equity, and inclusion. At the end of the session, I'll give you a little teaser as to what to expect on the 1st of December for our next one. But on the menu today, first and foremost, I want to lay some of the groundwork. I think diversity, equity, and inclusion is such an umbrella term. What are we talking about? Am I talking about the same thing that Roanna's talking about? Is Roanna talking about the same thing that Alina is talking about? So let's get it into context. Let's get some terms of reference about it. And then let's look at the end of the day, we're all in the people space. So let's look at the human cost. What does it actually mean for us as individuals? What does it actually cost? And then the meat of the session, why it matters. And within this meat of the session, I will open it up for wider discussion. I welcome your thoughts. I welcome your challenges. I welcome your observations. So again, that will be a nice chunk for us to have a discussion and share our challenges and, like I say, our successes. Then what next? What does the future hold? What does the future hold for us as organizations? And what can you take away from this session? What is it that you need to think about if you are looking at the world of work through this lens? And then, of course, the key thing of any Happy Maven event, your conversations, your sense of community. And that's where we will wrap up as to what we do next. So like I said, the first thing I want to do is to put some context to all of this. When we think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and I'm sure that some of you have faced this challenge, do some initiatives fail because we just throw too much into the bucket? Do we just say, this is the world of work, and absolutely everything that is other fits into that bucket? So that can be equal pay legislation, gender pay gap reporting, mental health, disability accessibility, well-being, pride events, any discourse around Black Lives Matter, employee networks. Oh, where do they sit? Let's throw them into D&I. Have we made it impossible to meaningfully address any of the challenges when we just throw anything that feels like other into this box? And then we're paralyzed when we go, we don't know where to start, because anything that felt like it didn't fit onto a corporate or business profitability agenda goes into this. So as you'll appreciate, these are many things that we can't possibly cover in an hour. But I would even go further and to say that when you are looking at your diversity, equity, and inclusion priorities, this bit of throwing everything into the bucket is what is setting us up to fail. My colleague Alina, when we were working on this roundtable, said that she thinks that I've got you here under false pretenses. And I guess that if you did think that in the next 60 minutes, and it's not even 60 now, it's 50, that I was going to answer all of your, DEI questions, and I was going to address your challenges, well, then she was absolutely right. I did get you here under false pretenses. I like to think that we here at Happy Maven, we're good, but we're not that good. We couldn't even begin to address your challenges, let alone make any meaningful change in 60 days or even 60 weeks. But what I hope that we can help you with, and those of you who have worked with us in the past, is that we are there to help you take steps along that journey. And that as long as from an organizational point of view, that there is that level of commitment, that we can make measurable, sustainable steps to meet those challenges together. And before we get overwhelmed, like I say, with everything that we've thrown into the bucket and how paralyzing it can be, let's just have a snapshot, a little reminder of the benefits of having a truly diverse and inclusive workplace. We know that any leaders in this space benefit from an enhanced reputation. And it goes not just across their employee base, but it's about brand credibility. It's about their customers. It's about the relationship with their supply chains, even their local communities and wider society. And there is so much research that companies with good representation on executive teams, with good female representation, significantly perform better than their competitors with fewer or no women. All of this evidence already exists, and I can pull it from multiple sources. Yet almost a third of UK businesses do not have a strategic approach to inclusion and diversity. And a recent survey of more than 2,000 HR professionals and business leaders across the UK and EMEA found that 31% of respondents said their organisation did not take a strategic approach to inclusion and diversity. So let alone taking real steps to implementing that, it isn't even strategic. Now think about any other aspect in your business that wouldn't have that strategic oversight. And yet we're supposed to be fundamentally changing the world of work without a strategic approach. Now, I'd really like to ask you a question. How many within your organizations, does your organization have a diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy? Have I launched the poll? Like I say, I can't see what you're seeing. Great, thank you. Thank you. So I've actually asked, yes, is it clearly defined? Yes, we have one, but it's not clearly defined. No, but it is a priority. And then it's reassuring that nobody said, no, it's not a priority or they don't know. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm just going to quickly share the results. I think a couple of you couldn't actually see the poll. Please, if you are comfortable sharing the answer to your poll in the chat, we will collate the responses. Thank you. Thank you. That was for me to get a little bit of a baseline as to where we all are. So why did I choose women for our first roundtable on this topic, on the cost of rolling back on diversity, equity, and inclusion? I suppose there's a number of reasons. You know, we had to start somewhere. We at Happy Maven work predominantly with HR teams, and so we're having a lot of interaction with female professionals. And over the last 18 months, we've seen up close and personal some of the challenges that they've had, and we've seen the impact on our peers in the UK, US, Israel, and India. And we all know that women around the world have been deeply affected by the pandemic, and it has heightened the large and small inequalities, both at work and also in the home. But even for the scale of this conversation, we are still, even though we're talking about women, we are talking about a small proportion of the global workforce. A lot of the research that we've collated will apply to office-based and professional staff. Even when we talk about working from home, it excludes frontline workers. It excludes people at the lower economic levels. So even recognizing that when we're talking about one section of diversity, equity, and inclusion, it is still excluding a lot of people. For us to understand that even what we share today is within that wider context. And despite many companies' efforts to support employees during the crisis, you know, we were helicoptered in on more than one occasion to support with well-being or to support with inclusion. Women are feeling exhausted, burnt out, and under pressure. according to a recent study of Women in the Workplace by Deloitte, this suggests that a lot of these norms have been upended. What are the expectations in relation to work? That employers need to understand the impact that the pandemic has had and what it means in relation to the workplace. What does it mean in relation to personal changes in circumstances on individuals? So, for example, and like some of you may be familiar with this, if you've had increased caring responsibilities, how flexible have your working options been? Have reasonable adjustments been made to enable each of you and your colleagues to perform at their best? Have you been able to genuinely consider the health, safety, and well-being of your employees? And even when we talk about flexible working and working from home, what else are we juggling at the same time? So I've already heard from people about health and safety requirements slipping further and further down the list. So whether that's the seat, the chair that you're sitting on, or your desk setup, what does that mean longer term? And the fears of either going back into the office, but equally balanced with the fears of never going back into the office. How do we juggle those conflicts? And we also, I think, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, many of us thought that this was a temporary state. We were in a position of transition, and at some point there would be equilibrium again. But we know now that this has potentially impacted the future of work at every level. And what does that mean? What does that mean for us individually? What are the decisions that women are making about their roles? But what does it also mean about women's role within the workforce? What does it mean for legacy planning? What does it mean for our talent pipelines? And I would like to ask you another question. Has your organization measured the impact of the past 18 months upon different employee groups? And give me a second and I will launch the question, and I hopefully you can all see the poll. And again, if you can't see the poll and you're comfortable answering within the chat, you can answer it directly to me and we'll just collate it in the larger format. Thank you. I love the yes, we have a forensic level of diversity data. So I do hope that you'll be sharing in the discussions as to what you're getting right. Thank you very much. I'm going to share the results. Thank you for sharing that. I know that a lot of this stuff is commercially sensitive, so I do appreciate that you're giving us this little insight into your workplaces. Thank you. So why does this all matter? Why is this the drum that I'm beating? Why, when we are juggling so much economic uncertainty, so much uncertainty even still from a health perspective, why am I still saying that diversity, equity, and inclusion should be a priority? Haven't you all got enough on your plates? The simple fact is that diverse teams are more innovative. Not just that, they're stronger and more agile. They're stronger and at anticipating shifts in consumer needs and behavior because they're representing a wide cross-section of the population. So that's when we talk about innovation for new products and services, because they're bringing their lived experiences to the table. They're helping us to garner a competitive edge. And beyond that, if we look specifically at women, whatever you feel about, is gender a social construct? Are there innate traits or not? Research has found that in leadership positions, women tend to demonstrate more than men 5 of the 9 types of leadership behavior that improve organizational performance. So we're looking at inspiration. We're talking about participative decision making. We're talking about expectations and rewards. We're talking, which is very relevant to all of you, people development. And one thing for any of you that have attended any of our roundtables or our wellbeing webinars, we talk about the importance of role modeling, that you can't just, talk the talk, you've got to be walking the walk. And these are some of the skills that women bring to those positions, that they bring to the table. And it also includes intellectual stimulation and efficient communication. Do we want to lose those? Do we want to lose those skills from every aspect of our business? And what's the consequences if we do? That if this is a trajectory, if it's a trajectory that we are feeling less and less satisfied, less and less motivated, if this is going to the bottom of the graph, what will it actually mean for us? What skills could we potentially be losing? Those of you that have ever done recruitment or talent attraction or people development programs, you'll know that the cost to business is beyond the financial, that it isn't just the direct costs of hiring and firing. The knowledge that we lose, the skills that we lose, the relationships that we lose, the hidden pockets of knowledge that we lose, that all has a huge impact. And even, I just wanted to share this as a snapshot. Even when legally mandated requirements become ditched, what does it bode for the future? So from 2017, employers with a headcount of more than 250 people within the UK were required to report on the gender pay gap. And yet we have found that within 2 weeks of the pandemic, it was used as an excuse to not report, to not share the data. And also for this year, the government has given us a 6-month extension of reporting. Why? Because it's no longer important. Why? Because they were getting pushback from industry that this was not a priority. And to me, this is a huge red flag. It's a huge warning sign that even legally mandated requirements are ditched at the first opportunity. So when we say, why are we not making headway on the agenda? This is why. The will doesn't exist. The first sign of turbulence, we reach for an excuse. And no, there isn't a glitch on the screen share. The screen has gone blank. My team collated some phenomenal stats and figures for this next portion, and I've ditched them all. And the reason that I've ditched them all is that after half a century on this planet, if I, as a woman, still need to argue as to why I should be here, why I deserve a seat at the table, it's no wonder that we've made no headway on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Half a century after equal pay legislation in the UK, and I'm sure it is similar timeframes for most of the countries that you're dialing in from, if we still can't get companies to share data on the gender pay gap, how are we expecting them to make any meaningful and impactful change? So now, in a way, I feel like I want to turn the question on its head. Instead of saying why it matters, I kind of want business and government and the decision makers to tell me why it shouldn't matter. As half of the world's population, don't we need this? When we talk about the costs to the economy, to wider society, don't you want our contribution? Don't you want us to be equal to carry those challenges? The Black feminist writer and activist Audre Lorde said, "The master's tools will never dismantle the master's house." And this is a very provocative statement, but she was absolutely right. She was angry. She was speaking at a conference and she was angry that the organizers had excluded race, age, class, sexuality from its topics and its speakers. And this is how I feel about the diversity, equity, and inclusion agenda, that I'm supposed to be knocking from the outside, and that everybody within an organization who is given that responsibility is trying to knock from the outside because nobody wants to concede anything from the inside. So on that note, I'd like to open this up to a discussion about anything that I've already just said, or challenge me, disagree with me. Has your organization reported on the gender pay gap? And if not, why not? I'm going to open it up now. Anything anybody would like to share or to ask? Thank you. A couple of people have shared in direct messages, so I won't share them widely if it's come as a direct message to me rather than to everybody. Is there anyone on the call whose company does report on a gender pay gap? Oh, my lovelies, you're really making me work at it today, aren't you? Okay, I'm not going to force anyone. I'm not going to pick on anyone. So I will move on. And you are welcome to share, like I say, within the chat to everybody, or to send me a direct message. Thank
Suki,
you.
I'm going to come in your rescue.
Thank you.
So we do disclose the data on gender pay gap for the UK, obviously. It has always been like a very big topic at my company, Yux Net-a-Porter, because that's rule and regulations for the UK specifically, but it's not related to all the other countries. So we have a big chunk of the population in the UK, yes, but we do also have a big chunk of the population in Italy, and a lot of people in the US and people in Japan and people in the Middle East and then people in Hong Kong. So the question has always been, we are kind of invited by government to disclose this data, but we should really disclose the data globally, because that's the point. I mean, it shouldn't be like an exercise that you're forced into by your government. It should be the will to disclose and to be transparent and to be, you know, willing to make changes. Because at the end of the day, I think that, you know, disclosing the data on gender pay gap, it's actually saying, okay, I'm here, but I want to get there. Yeah. Because there's a part where you actually are supposed to say, okay, I'm here, but what am I supposed to do to improve my situation? So yes, we have in the past disclosed it, but I think that it's, well, if it's a UK, just UK related, but I can bring my experience, and my experience being in charge of D&I for the global population, I'm always kind of not comfortable with the gender pay gap, just because it means that, you know, I'm focusing on the UK, but I should focus really globally. So, you know, that's my side of things.
Sarah, thank you so much for sharing that. And the key word for me there was transparency. That, to me, the gender pay gap reporting is the tip of the iceberg. That when we are not transparent globally, when we are not transparent about bonuses, when we are not transparent about salary bands, that's where we're hiding so much inequality. And I have all sorts of issues with gender pay gap reporting. But to me, I feel that it's reflective, that resistance that we have is reflective of that wider discomfort in being transparent. Rebecca, thank you for sharing. Would you like to share in the discussion?
Hi. Yes, so I was just listening to Sarah's comments there, and I looked up my organisation to see, because I didn't know off the top of my head, and I can see that we reported in 2017 and 2018, and then we seem to have gone a little bit quiet, but it's possible that the reporting is there. But then I started to think about, you know, the point that Sarah was coming up with, you know, if we're a global organisation, then how do we report that? And then I thought, well, in my organisation, we do have some senior women in very good jobs, but they're all based in the US. So if you look at gender pay gap reporting for the UK, you know, it's not a true picture of what we are as an organisation, because we do have a lot of, you know, powerful women. They're just not in the UK, which doesn't bode well for me. Because I'm in the UK. Yeah, and we do, we do have this. So Kay has just, sorry, I don't know your first name, Kay O'Sullivan, but Kay O'Sullivan has just, as Kristen, hi Kristen, has just put that, you know, the US salaries are 3 times our UK salaries, and that's about right for us as well. Yeah. So yeah.
And I think both yourself, Rebecca, and Kristen have also highlighted something wider, that if we can't even have a specific baseline for gender pay gap reporting, how can we even get close to what the DEI challenges are? Because that is also going to differ from location to location. What does diversity, equity, and inclusion mean if I live in Bangalore compared to I am based in Tel Aviv, compared to I am based in New York? So again, we have this broader agenda for global organizations without ever unpacking what those elements are. So I think that this is why I use gender pay gap reporting as a sort of a bit of a straw man in this situation, that if we can't even agree on that, how are we actually, I think what Sarah said was absolutely perfect, that you're using that as a trajectory for change. It is about where is it you're trying to get to. If we can't even agree on that, how can we agree on the wider agenda? Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Kristen. I will move on if nobody else would like to jump in. See, this is where I do miss being physically around a round table. Eye contact and body language are so important, and I miss them. So what does the future hold? You know, when we talk about what employers must do if they want to make a real difference, haven't we got to examine some of the different pieces that are going to be having consequences, are going to be having an impact upon gender equality for decades to come? And one of the pieces of research that I did want to share is from the Deloitte Millennial Report, where they have found how millennials and Gen Zs consider making workplace choices, well, consider making lots of choices. And if half of this selected sample are likely to be female, are likely to be women, what does it say about the future of work? What does it say about our pipeline for work? That if we are going to be challenged on our reporting, on our diversity agenda, on our commitments within the wider communities, what will it mean for our talent pipelines? How are we bringing people on board? And I'm sure that from your organizations, you also have an understanding of how millennials and Gen Z react as consumers. They put, they consider where they put their wallets. They consider where their values are, whether that's environmental, supply chain, food options. That this is the same when it comes to where they're going to be spending the majority of their days, where they contribute their talents and their skills. So this is something that we are all going to have to consider, that we're at risk of alienating a huge employment group if we don't address some of these needs. And I also wanted to share, when we talk about our companies as brands, what's the direction of travel for legal and business mandates? When we think about our companies as brands, we will talk about our diversity and inclusion agenda. We will talk about CSR. But this is becoming something that's more and more important. But one of the things I wanted to share that I've come across quite recently, and it's something that is gaining a little bit of prominence, is ESG. Also meeting our environmental, social, and our governance priorities and obligations. So this is an umbrella term. I don't expect you to be reading the slide. This will all be shared with you, but just a snapshot to say that this includes flexible working arrangements. It talks about social mobility. We're talking about how we are diverse and inclusive in our decision-making positions. And within the UK, within the last 48 hours, UK staff have gained the right to request flexible working from day one of their employment. What does that mean? And on the heels of gender pay gap reporting, MPs have recently backed ethnic pay reporting. I don't know how you quantify what ethnic is in that category, but again, this is giving us an idea of what the direction of travel is going to be. We know that CSR has gained traction over the last 2 decades. It's part of, most annual reports, but it's also part of the due diligence and governance that comes under investment. And this is the same for ESG. If we are looking at scaling our businesses, would they meet those criteria. So again, if you aren't bought into the moral or the feminist argument, it is that opportunity to buy into the business argument. And some of you may well be facing these challenges within your own peers on the leadership team and within the board. But I'd like to end before we open up to a discussion as to where you can go from here. What can you do? I think you will have got a flavour from my tone for the last 45 minutes that I don't think it's going to be easy. If it was easy, it would be done. I first came across the term diversity inclusion nearly 25 years ago. If it was easy, it would be done. And even before the pandemic, progress on advancements in diversity, equity, inclusion, well-being, mental health in the workplace was slow. And what we also know that the historical challenges for certain sectors of the working population, for certain diverse groups, has only been exacerbated by the COVID-19 crisis. And what diversity, equity, and inclusion can't do, it can't be a band-aid for systemic problems. It can't fix your culture. It can't meet your, it can't meet your legally mandated obligations if you're not giving them the attention. It cannot. We can't be looking at discriminatory practices or biases with a little helicoptered in workshop. But it is all possible. And what I'm going to go through 6 points, and they're in no order of importance. You can start somewhere, and they can even be circular. I did even think that this should perhaps be a circle. But first and foremost, as I said at the beginning, challenge and clarify what you mean in your organization by diversity, equity, and inclusion. What is in the bucket? So challenge your board when they say, oh, this is a priority for us. What do they actually mean? Clarify what your terms of reference for this are. I haven't put exec sponsorship on there. I've said sponsorship and commitment. Exec sponsorship often means that someone's name went on the slide deck and then they forget all about it. And then you perhaps wheel them out on, awareness days, etc. No, what I mean by sponsorship and commitment is that it is owned by at every level of the business, and especially at the top of the business. And by commitment, I mean that it's aligned to KPIs that are reported upon. To use another quote from James Baldwin, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it's faced. So if you're not measuring it, if there aren't the KPIs, it's not going to have that same impact. It's not going to have any impact. It's not going to be sustainable. The bucket is huge. The agenda is huge. The umbrella is too huge. So prioritize. I have worked in organizations when I have been asked to fix D&I. And when I challenge and say, well, what's your priority? Put this in some sort of pecking order. I have blank faces. But where do you start? What do you need to start on first? So without recognizing what the priorities are, you cannot focus on one thing at a time. It all, like I said at the beginning, it becomes paralyzing. You're overwhelmed, and it also loses its impact. It loses its messaging within the organization. I cannot champion the importance of data it is probably the most important thing. How do you know that you've made a difference if you're not measuring? To actually be comfortable enough to collate baseline data, and some of that might be scary. Some of that will be stuff that nobody wants to see. It is cleaning back behind the fridge and, you know, under the furniture and the rest of it. It is going to be grim, but you've got a starting point. You've got a baseline. And when I say interrogate the data, think about how it is that you're going to use it. What is it that you need? So again, we've had clients where they've said, can you do a survey to collect diversity and inclusion data? Well, from a confidentiality point of view or a data protection point of view, what does that mean? But why? If I'm going to be asking somebody about their caring responsibilities or their sexuality or their socioeconomic background, I need to have a pretty persuasive argument as to why I'm collating that data. And I need to have some sort of roadmap, some sort of outline as to what I'm going to do with it once I've got that data. So it can't just be a standalone exercise that basically people just feel that they've made themselves rather vulnerable, shared a lot of information, and have no idea where it's going to go. I've tried to make this punchy and I really couldn't. Pilot, start somewhere. Don't wait until your strategy is perfect. I love the pilot approach for most things. Because from a communications point of view, it means that you manage expectations. You say this is a pilot. You say that we can't know everything. We've got to start somewhere. You learn from that. You learn from that experience. You learn from the take-up. You learn from the feedback. You learn from the data. You adapt it and you keep evolving it until it feels like it's ready to scale. It's ready to make that impact. And just as you would take on no other huge organizational change without expertise and external specialism, you would not get a new employee HR platform, a new finance platform, you would be not looking at new real estate without external help. Why do you put the burden upon your internal teams to be fixing these crises? Get the help where and when you need it. And on that note, we are launching, we've launched a limited edition 4-month program to help support your HR and leadership teams with this sort of expertise and resources, with the tools that you need to inform your diversity, equity, inclusion, and well-being people agenda. And I am going to stop screen sharing at this point. I think I've spoken more than enough, and I'd like to hand over to all of you, please. And now I can see you all.
Suki, I've got a question, if that's all right. It's Julie.
Of course, Julie.
So I spoke to you in the past about, so basically we're a small company, well, medium-sized company, part of a larger sort of parent company. The parent company wanted to sort of launch a diversity and inclusion program. It's kind of been held up, so I've kind of gone and done my own thing as a small company. But I'm fearful that I've fallen into what you said at the beginning about don't try and cover everything. And I just kind of wanted a bit more advice, information on what you mean by that, really, I think.
What I mean by that is, I can't put it, I suppose it's an ugly metaphor, but it's a bucket. We throw everything that feels other into this bucket. It's all the problems that we don't want to look at. It's the problems that we don't really want to confront. We don't want to make fundamental organizational change. We don't want to create seats at the table. This is how we've always done things, and apparently D&I is now a big thing. So can we tinker around the edges so that we've got something to put in the annual report? So that's what I mean, Julie, that that everything's gone into the bucket. And that's why when I shared sort of, my tips as to where to go next, is to challenge when that is thrown onto your plate, when that is given to you as part of your objectives for the next 12 months, to say, can we clarify what fits under this? What is it that I'm actually changing or improving? Because we have metrics for everything else. We have metrics for talent retention. Yep, I think everybody on this call, we have this is what we would like churn to not be any higher than this. It's especially true for those of you who work in sales environments and there's a certain level of churn. We don't want it to be any higher than this. We have metrics attached to profitability. We have metrics attached to, any other outputs. But then with this, we're just go fix it without any clarity on what it is that we're fixing. Does that help, Julie?
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, I think I've maybe fallen foul of wanting to do everything. That's the trouble. I've started, so I've done that pilot bit. So I've gone out and I've started. I maybe just need to sort of fine tune it a bit more and get a bit more possibly direction, I think.
Yeah. And when I have challenged organizations, because I always go in for my, and I make no bones of this, if you asked me to put all of the different items in an order of priority, I always say, let's start with sex, let's start with women. And it just isn't sexy enough. It isn't sexy enough. Because and then when I say, well, if you can't get the legally mandated stuff right, what chance have you got on anything else? Sorry, did someone, oh, yes, sorry, Kirsten, you've raised your hand, sorry.
That's okay, I just wanted you to kind of carry on the pilot concept. We're talking to an organization that does online learning, but peer learning also. So there's rather than LinkedIn, which is kind of you doing a passive learning thing and no one really quantifies what's been done or learned or any impact. We're looking at this digital peer learning thing, and we're talking about pilot. And I'm wondering two things. What would be sort of a good ratio or a good group size for a pilot? And we're a global organization with 50 companies around the world. And one leader said, oh, I think it should just be one of the bigger studios. And I said, I think if we're a global company, we're looking to do a global approach, that we should do a pilot that takes like a bit, from at least one from every studio. But do you just start with management leadership, or do you take a cross section of levels?
I do think that you need to start with leadership, because if you're not all singing from the same hymn sheet, you trip up very, very, very quickly. This was definitely true for well-being approaches, that if there isn't that consistency between what people are hearing and what people are seeing, it isn't going to work. And when I say a pilot, I don't necessarily mean restrict the numbers. It can go across the whole of the global organization, as long as this is where you really need support from your internal comms team. As long as it is framed that this is a fact-finding exercise, or Julie will remember the terminology that we use, this is a discovery session or a discovery period. So as long, and this is where being supported.
I think for us, the numbers issue is because it's a price per head.
Okay.
So I think, you know, I was sort of looking at, if we're a global company of next to 10,000 people, I thought maybe 300 people in a kind of pilot thing would be kind of 300 to 500 would be kind of a nice number, but I'm not sure because we've never done it.
Yeah. Well, pilot to the pilot. So if that's the model that would work for your client group, that makes a lot of sense. If there is going to be a financial cost, but also to me, the financial cost is also then going to be a reflection of how committed the leadership team and the board are. Because if you go to them with the numbers and then they go, no, this is far too high, it gives me an indication of how much of a priority it is for them.
Well, they gave us, they put together a DEI council. So there's maybe 10 of us around the globe, and without necessarily a clear remit, without necessarily a clear or any budget or any line communication. And then we heard through someone else that they were appointing DEI you know, leaders, like specific people with a job that's actually paid, not just a sort of your passion thing, and hadn't actually told any of us. So it's just classic. But anyway, I won't air the dirty laundry.
I should not laugh, Kristen, but yes, that is a little bit of a reflection, isn't it? That it isn't joined up. I'm really conscious of everyone's time. You know that I'm available to all of you individually. I'd like to share one last poll, if you're amenable, please, before we wrap up the session. I hope you can all see it. And it's asking, what is your next step on the diversity, equity, and inclusion journey? That's great. Thank you all. I'll share those results of this one, which is quite optimistic. I do like that. It's quite optimistic. Thank you all for your time, and thank you so much for your participation, because I do know that a lot, like I say, a lot of this stuff is sensitive, whether it's commercially sensitive, personally sensitive. It isn't necessarily an easy or comfortable topic to discuss. Our next round table is going to be on the 1st of December, same time, possibly the same place, I don't know. It's going to be on the 1st of December, and we're going to be talking about the cost of rolling back on diversity, equity, and inclusion, but specifically in relation to young people. So we'll be talking about social mobility, we'll be talking about lost opportunities. If suddenly working from your childhood bedroom is now your workplace, what does that mean for mentorship? What does it mean for career development? What does it mean for surprise conversations? I think that that's going to be a very illuminating and possibly concerning piece of research. So please do join us on Wednesday, the 1st of December. Please, like I say, reach out if there's anything any of you need in the meantime. Would love, to discuss that further. And my request to all of you is, if you can please share our new 4-month package with your networks, that would be appreciated. We normally work with clients for a minimum of a 6-month program, but to mark our 4th birthday, which is this week, we're doing a special 4-month package that will help you have that toolkit, that at the end of that 4 months, you are ready, whether you bring it in-house or you choose to work with another provider, you've actually got some clarity. It is more than a discovery session. It is an unapologetic look at what your state of play is. So thank you all very much. Enjoy the rest of the week. It is lovely to see you, even if for some of you you haven't put your cameras on, but it is lovely to see you on the call. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Suki.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Suki.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Bye.